Have you ever imagined that one of history's most famous trials conceals astonishing details few people know? What if I told you that the celebrated case in which King Solomon threatened to cut a baby in half was not only an act of divine inspiration, but also a display of investigative techniques revolutionary for its era? What would we think of the wisest man who ever lived if we discovered his wisdom extended far beyond split-second judgments, involving methods almost scientific, methods that wouldn't be formalized until millennia later? This is the remarkable account of Solomon's judgment that many know only in part, a story revealing how true wisdom merges spiritual insight with careful observation of reality. Picture Jerusalem nearly 3,000 years ago. The kingdom of Israel stood at its height, a time of prosperity and glory. Young King Solomon, son of the great King David, had just taken the throne. The weight of responsibility on his shoulders was immense. As the heir to the beloved King David, the people's expectations were sky high. One night, God appeared to Solomon in a dream and invited him to ask for whatever he desired. Instead of riches or power, the young monarch asked for wisdom to govern God's people with justice. This request delighted God so much that he granted Solomon unparalleled wisdom and bestowed wealth and honor beyond any other king. Yet that divine wisdom had not yet been demonstrated publicly. Solomon's reign was fresh, and the people watched with cautious hope, wondering if this young ruler truly possessed the qualities needed to lead the nation. It is in this setting that one of the Bible's most emblematic episodes unfolds, recorded in 1 Kings 3:16-28, NIV KJV. Two women came before the king with an impossible dilemma. Jerusalem's streets swirled with merchants, pilgrims, and ordinary citizens as these two women made their way toward the royal palace. Both bore expressions of anguish and determination. One carried a baby in her arms. The other walked empty-handed but fixed her gaze on the child. Can you imagine the tension between them? The whispered accusations, the hateful glances exchanged with every step. Finally, they reached the throne room and found Solomon seated in all his royal splendor. Wise advisors and counselors surrounded him, eager to see how this young king would administer justice. The women knelt before him, and the first spoke. With a trembling voice her emotion barely contained. "My lord, this woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a son while she was with me. 3 days after my son was born, this woman also gave birth. We were alone. No one else was in the house. During the night, her son died because she lay on him. In the middle of the night, she got up, took my son from my side while I slept, and laid him at her breast. Then she placed her dead son in my arms. When I woke up to nurse my son, I saw he was dead. But when I examined him in daylight, I realized he was not my child." As this scene unfolds, pause for a moment and imagine yourself in that throne room. If you were one of Solomon's advisors, what solution would you propose for this unsolvable dilemma? How do you decide between two contradictory accounts when there are no witnesses, no clear physical evidence, and all you have are the desperate words of two women? Consider the pressure on the young king. His ruling would shape his reputation across the entire kingdom. This is the kind of case that reveals the character and wisdom of a ruler. The second woman interrupted heatedly. "No, the living child is mine, and the dead one is yours." The first woman insisted. "No, the dead child is yours, and the living one is mine." Their voices echoed in the throne room, emotions raw and exposed. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances, aware of the case's complexity. How do you resolve a dispute with no proof, no witnesses, only mutual accusations? Here, the biblical text gives us the essential narrative. Faced with this stalemate, Solomon asked, "Bring me a sword." When one was brought, the king commanded, "Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other." The reaction was immediate. The true mother, her heart breaking with love for her child, cried out, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." Meanwhile, the other woman said coldly, "Neither I nor you shall have him. Divide him." Then Solomon declared his verdict. "Give the living child to the first woman, "Don't kill him, she is his mother." This is the story we know from the Bible, a direct and powerful account of divine wisdom manifested through Solomon. When all Israel heard the judgment the king had handed down, they held him in great awe, for they saw that God had given him wisdom to administer justice. But what if I told you there is more to this story? What if there were details that deepen our understanding of this extraordinary moment without contradicting the sacred text? This is where complementary historical sources come into play. Though secondary to Scripture's authority, they help us visualize the broader context of this episode. Flavius Josephus, a first-century Jewish historian, documented many events in Israel's history in his work Antiquities of the Jews. Writing nearly 1,000 years after Solomon, Josephus drew on oral traditions and perhaps documents no longer extant. In Book 8, Chapter 2, he offers additional details about this famous trial. Have you ever wondered what happened before that dramatic moment with the sword? According to Josephus, when the two women first appeared before Solomon, the young king adopted a surprisingly methodical approach. Before suggesting the division of the child, Solomon ordered that the deceased infant be brought forward as well. This detail does not appear in the biblical account, but it reveals something fascinating. The king did not rely solely on divine inspiration. He conducted a careful investigation. Josephus suggests that Solomon closely observed each woman's facial expressions and body language as they saw both babies, one alive and one dead, placed side by side. The historian indicates that the king examined the patterns of bloodstains on the linens wrapping the deceased child and studied the emotional reactions of both women when confronted with physical evidence. It's important to note that these complementary details do not contradict the biblical narrative. They fill in the gaps left by Scripture's concise account. The Bible gives us the essentials: the dispute, the seemingly insoluble dilemma, Solomon's wise strategy, and the perfect resolution. Historical sources like Josephus help us appreciate the depth of divine wisdom manifested through concrete human actions. One detail the Bible itself mentions, but that often gets omitted in popular retellings, is that both women were prostitutes. The Hebrew term zonot makes this clear. This is no trivial fact. In a society where a woman's testimony already carried less legal weight than a man's, the testimony of prostitutes would have been even more suspect. Solomon showed no bias. He treated the case with the same seriousness and dedication he would have given to any other, recognizing that divine justice shows no partiality. Let's return to that crucial moment when Solomon proposed dividing the baby. The biblical text tells us the true mother pleaded, "Please, my lord, give her the living child. Don't kill him." But Josephus adds a fascinating nuance to her. According to him, the mother said something like, "Neither you nor I shall have him." This phrase reveals something profound, a sense of self-reproach, an implicit admission that her own carelessness may have set the stage for tragedy. Pause and reflect on this psychological dimension. Isn't it striking how, even in a moment of desperate urgency to save her child, this woman expressed a sense of responsibility? How often do we make tough decisions carrying the weight of past mistakes? There is deep humility in that reaction, standing in stark contrast to the cold calculation of the other woman, who preferred to see the child dead rather than admit her deception. This perspective gives us a glimpse of what might be the first documented use of behavioral psychology in a legal setting. Solomon didn't base his judgment solely on words or oaths, but on careful observation of genuine human reactions under extreme stress. He understood that truth often emerges not from what we say, but from how we respond emotionally in a crisis. Josephus also notes that this trial occurred early in Solomon's reign, when he was still very young, possibly only 20 years old. This case established his reputation throughout Israel and beyond, cementing his authority while he was still inexperienced. News of the extraordinary judgment spread quickly, and people began bringing their most difficult cases to the young king, confident in his ability to discern truth even in the most complex situations. Here we encounter a surprising revelation. True wisdom is never purely theoretical or abstract. The divine wisdom granted to Solomon did not manifest as encyclopedic knowledge disconnected from reality. It showed up as a keen ability to observe, analyze, and discern the human heart in concrete situations. Consider for a moment, what does this story teach us about the nature of wisdom? We often assume that being wise means accumulating facts, memorizing principles, or mastering abstract theories. But Solomon's wisdom reveals something profoundly different. True wisdom is practical, observant, and attuned to human emotions and nonverbal cues that often speak louder than words. Can you imagine how your life would change if you could develop even a fraction of Solomon's ability? How would your personal relationships, professional decisions, or ethical dilemmas shift if you could discern not only what people say, but what their hearts truly feel? This perspective offers a deep interpretation. Solomon's judgment was not merely a display of cleverness or cunning, but an example of how divine justice operates with insight that transcends literal law. God did not grant Solomon only knowledge of statutes and ordinances. He gave him the capacity to see beyond appearances, to understand human motives, and to uncover truth hidden beneath layers of deception. A second interpretation suggests that this story teaches us how truth often reveals itself through genuine emotional reactions when we face extreme situations. The real mother could not bear the idea of her child's death, even if it meant losing him to another woman. Her love was authentic because it sought the child's welfare, not possession. In contrast, the false mother was more interested in winning the dispute than in the baby's well-being. This dynamic leads to a third insight. Solomon's judgment offers a lesson in sacrificial love. The birth mother was willing to give up her claim on the child to save his life. This principle of sacrificial love echoes throughout the biblical narrative, culminating in Christ's ultimate sacrifice, laying down his life for humanity's salvation. Now, what does this ancient story mean for us today? How can we apply these profound truths in the 21st century? First, we're reminded that true wisdom goes far beyond intellectual knowledge. In an age of instant information, we risk confusing data accumulation with genuine wisdom. Solomon's example shows us that divine wisdom involves emotional and spiritual discernment, the ability to perceive the unspoken, to see past appearances, and to grasp the motivations of the human heart. Second, this story highlights the value of impartial justice. Solomon refused to be swayed by social status. Even though both women were prostitutes, an already marginalized group, he treated their case with the same gravity he would any other. Divine justice shows no favoritism. In our deeply unequal society, we're challenged to pursue that same impartiality, treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their background. Third, the complementary historical perspective helps us appreciate how Solomon's practical wisdom anticipated methods that would only be formalized millennia later. His approach, observing emotional reactions, analyzing physical evidence, creating a test scenario to reveal truth, parallels modern forensic techniques and behavioral psychology. This reminds us that divine wisdom is not outdated or disconnected from practical reality. On the contrary, it often foreshadows discoveries that human science will take centuries to formalize. There is something deeply moving in the image of that young king facing an impossible dilemma, relying not only on divine inspiration, but also on careful observation of human nature. It reminds us that God often works through our natural faculties, observation, analysis, empathy, enhancing them with his supernatural wisdom. One of the most powerful lessons of this story is about true maternal love. The genuine mother's willingness to give up her child to save him exemplifies selfless love that seeks another's good above personal interest. In an increasingly individualistic culture where relationships are often measured by what we get out of them, this ancient story challenges us to rediscover the transformative power of sacrificial love, convenience, or even rights for the welfare of the young. Imagine how our communities might flourish if each of us were ready to put another's needs above our own. This is the practical wisdom flowing from that ancient narrative. When The people heard Solomon's judgment. They responded with reverence and awe, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. Notice the text does not say they were merely impressed by Solomon's intelligence or creativity. They recognized something deeper, the presence of divine wisdom manifested through a human king. This may be the most important lesson for us. Today, true wisdom does not come primarily from formal education, accumulated experience, or natural brilliance, though all these have their place. The wisdom that transforms lives and solves impossible situations comes from God. Like Solomon, we are called to acknowledge our own insufficiency and ask God for a discerning heart to handle the complex challenges we face. In the book of James we read, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." James 1:5 NIV. This promise echoes Solomon's experience and reminds us that the same source of wisdom is available to us today. When we face situations that seem unsolvable, family conflicts, ethical dilemmas at work, tough decisions about the future, we can follow the example of both Solomon and the true mother in this story. Like Solomon, we can ask God for wisdom beyond human understanding, and like the mother, we can choose sacrificial love that puts another's well-being before our own interests. The forgotten judgment of Solomon shows us that true wisdom manifests at the intersection of divine insight and attentive human observation, between eternal principles and practical application, between knowledge of the law and understanding the human heart. It is a wisdom that unites mind and heart, theory and practice, abstract principles and concrete love. As we conclude this extraordinary story, we are invited on a journey in search of true wisdom, not just intellectual knowledge, but discernment that penetrates to the deepest motivations of the human heart. We are challenged to develop both our observational skills and our spiritual sensitivity, recognizing that divine wisdom often reveals itself at the crossroads of these two realms. And perhaps just as the Israelites who heard about Solomon's judgment, we too may feel a sacred awe when we realize that the same divine wisdom that guided the young king is available to us today. A wisdom that transforms impossible situations, unveils hidden truth, and guides us through life's most complex challenges. The next time you face a situation that seems beyond resolution, remember young King Solomon and his extraordinary method that combined divine inspiration with human observation. Ask yourself, what wisdom beyond human understanding can I seek for this moment? How can I develop the ability to see past appearances and discern what truly matters? This is the legacy the forgotten judgment of Solomon leaves us. Not just a fascinating story from the past, but a perpetual invitation to seek and live true wisdom. Have you ever been in a situation where you needed wisdom beyond common knowledge to solve an apparently impossible problem? How does Solomon's story resonate with your own journey of seeking discernment? Share your experiences in the comments below. Ao concluir esta extraordinária história, somos convidados a uma jornada de busca pela verdadeira sabedoria. Não apenas conhecimento intelectual, mas discernimento que penetra até as motivações mais profundas do coração humano. Somos desafiados a desenvolver tanto nossa capacidade de observação quanto nossa sensibilidade espiritual, reconhecendo que a sabedoria divina frequentemente se manifesta na interseção entre estes dois domínios. E talvez assim como os israelitas que ouviram sobre o julgamento de Salomão, também nós possamos sentir um sagrado temor ao reconhecer que a mesma sabedoria divina que orientou o jovem rei está disponível para nós hoje. Uma sabedoria que transforma situações impossíveis, revela a verdade escondida e nos guia através dos mais complexos desafios da vida. A próxima vez que você enfrentar uma situação aparentemente sem solução, lembre-se do jovem rei Salomão e de seu extraordinário método que combinava inspiração divina e observação humana. E pergunte-se, que sabedoria além da compreensão humana posso buscar para este momento? Como posso desenvolver a capacidade de ver além das aparências, de discernir o que realmente importa? Esta é a herança que o julgamento esquecido de Salomão nos deixa. Não apenas uma história fascinante do passado, mas um convite permanente para buscar e viver a verdadeira sabedoria. E você? Já viveu alguma situação onde precisou de uma sabedoria, além do conhecimento comum para resolver um problema aparentemente impossível? Como a história de Salomão ressoa com suas próprias experiências de busca por discernimento? Compartilhe nos comentários sua jornada em busca da verdadeira sabedoria.